and living wages, but we have to talk about them as right and wrong and life and death. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, that's perfect. Whatever you did with your microphone. Willie, guys, take over. And we just want to make sure your microphone is clear and opens and close to the top of your shirt. You work on that. Willie, guys, take it.
Pastor Rosita, let me go to you here in New York City and just ask you about how you're filling this gap. Obviously, the irony and the great dilemma is that at a time when people need to sort of be together, need to practice their faith, and need to congregate in your church, for example, they physically can't. So how are you overcoming that, and how are you filling that void in people's lives right now?
Well, this is an unprecedented set of circumstances for faith communities. I mean, the essence of our operation of our mission is to connect people and to build a sense of community. And right now, we know that the most loving thing we can do is social distance and stay at home. So that presents challenges, and I think it's challenges that expose something about the human condition that church leaders and faith communities need to be attending to. Right now, I live in New York, and my experience with our congregation is that there's like two poles of experience. So on the one hand, you have an isolating effect, and then on the other, you have a suffocating effect. So I'm married, I have 4 children, and we are cramped in a 2-bedroom apartment in Lower Manhattan right now. What you're witnessing behind me is a minor miracle of serenity. And what we're seeing is we need to attend to the human psyche right now. Of course, as Reverend Barber mentioned, we have justice issues that need to be addressed from a faith perspective, but we also need to care for people. People who are suffocating right now are awakening to some of the great practices in our tradition, like silence, and stillness, and solitude. And the church can step in and fill a vacuum and a great need there. And for those who are isolated, I think we are looking for creative ways to create connections where people can be vulnerable and process how they're doing and feel a sense of support so we can show up for each other in this time.
And Pastor Radzina, the church obviously plays such an important part for the poor in this country and the poor around the world in making their lives better. We think about the homeless at a time like this. We think about soup kitchens that are struggling because the volunteers can't come and be in the physical space. What can the church do in a time when people are being told that the best thing to do is to stay inside about helping those vulnerable people?
So our church, like many other churches and faith communities across the country, have partners like the Bowery Mission or a House on Beekman in the South Bronx, who are working with children, who are working with the homeless, and are taking care of people. And so we've been in high communication with them, not only for funding. We started a Corona relief fund. And that's also, one of the great beauties of a faith community. I think we step into a moment now. We're doing digital gatherings so that people can feel connected. And in a chaotic moment, they can center themselves in rituals that matter, and stories and symbols that give them meaning and stability. We started a thing called digitalchurch.nyc so that people could actually worship with their community and connect. We're doing a thing on Zoom called the Eights. I heard Zoom is now worth more than Marriott, which is fascinating. But at 8 a.m. and at 8 p.m., we have people who are connecting and fielding needs and making sure that we're taking care of each other. But it's like the government needs to be doing stuff, but our medium-sized communities can step into a space that really matters. Our healthcare workers are exhausted, and this is not a race. This is not a sprint. This is a marathon. And we need to be preparing for ongoing care, not only for our medical professionals who are exhausted, but also for our parishioners who face the anxiety of this moment.
I think we've got the connection fixed with Reverend Barber, and John Meacham has a question. John?
Reverend, the tradition I come out of, the Anglican one, has a great tradition of morning prayer, evening prayer, where C.S. Lewis enjoined us to say the words even if we don't feel it, because at some point you might. I'm wondering are there any scriptural passages? Is there any spiritual practice that you would recommend to folks?
Well, certainly the church always has to be pastoral and prophetic. And so while we engage traditions, pastoral traditions of calling people to prayer, one of the most important things that the church can do in this moment to give people hope is to be prophetic. It's to honor what Jesus said about telling nations that how you treat the least of these is how a nation is delivered. to remind them of the prophets that said, "Woe unto those who legislate evil and rob the poor of their rights." So we should be challenging the government. We should be saying, listen, you can't forget the poor, the 140 million poor, like Lola, who lives in her car, 3 children. She doesn't get any, she won't get any of this benefit. We have to say, go back and include Lola, include the undocumented workers, put enough money in there for child care for all of those who need it. Be reminded that $1,200 is not enough for poor people. It's too little, too late. We have to do better. We have to remind this country that 700 people were dying a day already from poverty before this happens. Now, you say, is that the church's role? Yes, because this is Lent. This is the season of repentance. The Bible gives us a clear way out of this one. Nation says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves. That means you can't be a narcissist, and will turn from their evil ways. The Bible suggests that not caring for poor people and the least of these is evil. You have to turn from that, turn to them, not just the corporations. And then the Bible says, and then God will heal the land. The land will be healed when we turn to each other and not on each other, and the church as a whole. Yes, to take care of the sick. Yes, to but also call out.
Okay.
And that is a life of prayer as well.
Thank you very much, Reverend William Barber and Pastor Michael Arudzina. Thank you both very much. And one last story this morning before we close, as it applies to the shortage of critical medical supplies, and that shortfall grows nationwide. The Washington Post reports nearly 1.5 million N95 masks are sitting unused in a U.S. government warehouse in Indiana, according to multiple sources. The emergency stockpile is being held by the U.S. Customs and Border Protection and has not been used because they are past their expiration date. This comes despite the CDC's guidelines that has been issued that states it is in fact safe to use the expired masks. During this outbreak, the Post reports DHS officials decided to offer the respirator masks to the TSA, whose workforce has been clamoring for more protective equipment and has no plans to offer the masks to hard-hit hospitals or hand them over to FEMA. We have a huge situation, Willie, with the hospitals. So final thoughts from Willie Geist and John Meacham. I'll just say, in light of our last segment, I'm praying for the president. I'm praying for his team. The reality from the front lines is bad. The data from Johns Hopkins shows America is faring badly, and the testing is not even close to where it should be. So I'm praying they all get on the same page. Willie?
And I would just say briefly, John Meacham, that the confirmation this morning from Prime Minister Boris Johnson that he, in fact, has tested positive for coronavirus shows you how quickly this moves, how quickly things change. A couple of weeks ago, he was, let's say, less than concerned about it in his country, and now he has contracted coronavirus.
Wow.
John Meacham.
And the American look, America, it benefits from the fact that we're the fullest manifestation of the Enlightenment and of reason and of fact. And let's follow reason and fact, not ideology.
That does it for us this morning. Picks up the coverage right now. Thank you.
After Prince Charles got the same diagnosis. Well, back in this country, the number of cases continues to rise, but President Trump is still pushing ahead with plans to get life in the U.S. back to normal. Here's what he said just yesterday.
A lot of progress is made, but we got to go back to work. We may take sections of our country, we may take large sections of our country that aren't so seriously affected, and we may do it that way, but we've got to start the process pretty soon.
In a letter, the president said to America's governors, he explained how he sees this process playing out. He said the United States will track the virus with what he calls robust surveillance testing. Then they will use that information to classify counties as either high risk, medium risk, or low risk. Dr. Anthony Fauci admitted yesterday they still don't have all of the data they need to even make those new determinations. But once they come out, the guidelines could give some state leaders a reason to relax their social distancing rules. Of course, many health officials have warned that the worst impact of this virus is still yet to come. And finally, we've got a little added drama to tell you about down in Washington. The House is back in session as we speak. They're set to vote on that massive economic relief bill that the Senate passed earlier this week. But right now, the timing is actually up in the air. I want to take you first to our own Garrett Hake on Capitol Hill. Okay, Garrett. There is no way, let's be honest, there is no way that the House is not going to pass a bill that the Senate passed 96-0. So besides political drama, which is the last thing we need in the midst of a crisis, what's going on here?
Stephanie, if there is drama today, it will be drama of the very dumbest congressional kind. One or two members grandstanding to prove a point about calling for a vote today. Here's how things can and should go today. We're expecting up to 3 hours of debate on this bill. Members who have made their way back to Washington, many of them will have an opportunity to debate this bill, to talk about it in public on the floor under social distancing conditions. After that 3 hours are up, the leadership in both parties are hoping to call a voice vote wherein however many members might be present on the floor at that time can shout out aye or nay if they oppose or in favor of the bill, and the chair would make a ruling. At that moment, it's possible that any member who's on the floor could call for a recorded vote. The president alluded to this last night as a possibility that someone might grandstand. In that case, they would have to have a quorum. Half the total members of this body would have to be present and count their votes for this to pass. As you said, make no mistake, this will ultimately pass. The question is, does it pass easily with minimal risk to the members, their staffs, and the broader community of gathering here on Capitol Hill today? Or does somebody try to make a point and draw this out until perhaps much later in the day, putting more of his or her colleagues at risk? That's the height of dumb political drama, and we may see it around lunchtime today.
When lives are at risk, why not grandstand? Extraordinary. All right, now I want to take you to New York, where lives are at risk. 84 deaths were reported yesterday. My colleague Ron Allen is there. Ron, again, I want to thank you. This is really hard reporting. You are in the heart of it. Please, tell us the latest this morning.
Well, Stephanie, this is where you see the human face of what's happening here. Behind me is this line of people who are here again this morning waiting for tests. They come at 6 o'clock in the morning. They wait for hours and hours. This is a public hospital in Queens, New York, which is the hardest hit part of the city for the virus. It has the highest incidence of the virus. This is Elmhurst Hospital, which has been described as the center of the epicenter. The hospital is overwhelmed. The emergency room is crowded. There was a 24-hour period here earlier in the week where as many as 13 people died. We're not getting hour by hour, even day by day updates from the hospital because they're so overwhelmed. But this is where you really see and feel what's happening. The other thing that happens here all day are ambulances come and go, picking up people, bringing them back here for emergency treatment. The EMTs in the city say that they are doing as many as 5,000, 6,000 calls a day, which some compare to what was happening around September 11th. A different set of circumstances, but that gives you an idea of the magnitude of it. So much so now that the word is if you call 911, only do it if you can't breathe, or if it's a really, really dire emergency, because the EMTs are being overtaxed. They have a high rate of sickness themselves. There are a lot of people calling in sick, and so it's straining the system. The other big issue here, of course, is hospital capacity. This center, Elmhurst, is about 125% of capacity. 125% of capacity, and this is a 60-year-old hospital. It's been here for a long, long time. And so they are trying to find other places to send patients, not coronavirus patients, the other patients who are here for other needs. We know that the U.S. Navy hospital ship Comfort is arriving now ahead of schedule this weekend. We know that all over New York City, medical workers, officials are scouring for additional hospital beds. They're going to open up the Jacob Javits Center with 2,000 beds, they say, in a week to 10 days. I'm not sure exactly what the status of that is. Here in Queens, the local officials want to see a facility, an emergency facility somewhere near this community, which has been so hardly hit. Some have suggested opening up Citi Field, where the New York Mets baseball team plays. They're not playing now, of course, because the season's been suspended. But that's what they see as the scale of the magnitude.
Okay,
here.
then, Ron.
That's what they think the response should be. And again, just every day, this line comes, and these people are desperate for help.
Okay, then can you explain this rationale? The lines are around the block. You got 1 million square feet at the Javits Center opening up. Elmhurst is at 125% capacity. And the President of the United States is saying he doesn't believe Governor Cuomo actually needs all the ventilators he's asking for. Can you help me understand where this is coming from?
Dare I say politics, but here they got 40 ventilators yesterday. They were sent by the city, by the state. There's been a constant demand for ventilators. We heard this, through all the briefings. What we heard, ventilator, because again, those are used in ICUs to keep people alive. At this hospital, we understand that the ICUs have been at 3 times the capacity that they normally are. 3 times the capacity. And that's presumably where those 13 people died during the 24-hour period. And we can assume, or we believe there's probably going to be more of that. So again, there's been a lot of back and forth between the governor, the mayor, the president. I think there's going to be, we'll see what the governor has to say when he briefs about that comment. But some things just are said. It's not my place to make a judgment about this, but obviously, people here I think will just be rolling their eyes about that. Stephanie.
Politics over public health. Ron, thank you so much. I want to move to another part of the country. Andy Beshear, he is the governor of Kentucky. He joins me now. Governor, thank you so much for being here. In your state, you've got about 250 cases, and you're in one of those areas that some lawmakers are saying it's time to relax these social distancing rules and get back to work.
They're having all kinds of technical difficulty today.
The 24 hours before that, the day before that, there were 13 deaths, Julia. So this, it's taxing. You talk to doctors and nurses coming out, and they tell us that they are busting at the seams with patients who are trying to get care, that they are short on equipment, even though that it's being said there's plenty of equipment for the next week or 2 weeks, but they still feel like that they're short. Another nurse told me she's in a constant state of paranoia. She left a 24-hour shift wearing all of her protective gear, and she says she's not so much worried about getting sick herself, but if she gets sick and then passes it on to other patients, that's what she's fearful of, rightfully so. Behind me, I want to show you this line. I mean, this is a line, Julia, that we have been seeing all week. We've been here every day of this week, and this line always is like this or longer. It doesn't really seem to ever get shorter. These are people who are trying to just see a doctor. It doesn't necessarily mean they'll actually get a coronavirus test, but they just want to see a doctor because they're not feeling well. And some people here are waiting in lines for hours just to see that doctor. I actually saw one woman a couple days ago hobbling over in her walker with her family members holding her up, then get in that line. I mean, it's just heartbreaking to see that. And you really would be hard-pressed to see anywhere in this immediate neighborhood to find anyone who isn't wearing a mask. It's really, it feels, it's very stressful. I'm not going to lie to you about the situation here. And I can't even imagine what it's like inside, never mind outside.
Neither can I. I mean, the equipment's one thing, but it's the medical staff. It's a shame we can't bring medical staff from other states that have less of an issue to help the ones here at this moment. Bryn, great job. You've been doing an incredible job. Thank you for reporting on this story. Harrowing for everyone, I think, involved. All right, coming up on First Move, help is on the way. US manufacturing companies wait for the government aid after work comes to a screeching halt. And on the flip side, working overtime, meal kit services come into high demand with restaurants closed and millions homebound. Stay with us, more to come.
They have.
It's amazing. See the benefits of
Ambulances, all-night sirens in this city right now. Maybe not all coronavirus. There are other issues you're dealing with. Talk about the balancing act going on, dealing with coronavirus, but also so many other emergencies. Yeah, we're breaking records as far as the amount of runs a day. EMS is responding to numbers that are unfathomable. As far as the fire department or firefighters are concerned, we're still responding to all the emergencies that we always respond to. The coronavirus is an added responsibility. So that is it's a challenge, and it's a challenge that our members are putting themselves on the line and then going home, seeing their family, and they don't know if they're spreading the virus within their families, and that's a real problem for us. Last bit on this, there's a PSA that the fire department has put out here. It's important because I think it applies not just to New York City, but communities around the country. Let's take a quick listen.
Only call 911 during a real emergency. Allow first responders to assist those most in need. If you are not severely ill, follow the guidelines put in place by the New York City Department of Health and keep healthcare access available for those with more severe illnesses.
Minute we have, as I understand it, here in New York City, 911 has been overwhelmed. If you've got a tic-tac, I understand. Talk about balancing 911 and making sure people are calling with real emergencies right now. Well, that's a year-round problem that we have. Sometimes people calling 911 for what they may consider an emergency, but perhaps really isn't. Now it's more important than ever because our departments are so stressed to be calling 911 for something that certainly is not life in jeopardy emergency. It's jamming up the system, and where we could be more helpful for somebody who's having a life-threatening emergency, we're responding to other things that perhaps aren't as important right now as you may think. Yeah, well, Gerard Fitzgerald, you've got about 170 members of the FDNY have already tested positive for the coronavirus. We're thinking of them, and all the first responders all around the country are helping a lot of people. Appreciate you coming in today. Thank you. Thanks, Ed. Thank you very much. All right, and a reminder, this Sunday, Elton John will host an all-new benefit special. It's called Fox Presents the iHeart Living Room Concert for America. It'll be on all Fox platforms, including right here on the Fox News channel. It will feature performances by music's biggest stars. That includes Alicia Keys, Backstreet Boys, Billie Eilish, Billie Joe Armstrong, Mariah Carey, Tim McGraw, many more. It's going to air commercial-free to pay tribute to frontline medical professionals working to treat patients. It's going to seek donations from viewers and listeners again. It's going to air commercial-free this Sunday, all Fox platforms and on all iHeartMedia radio stations around America.
Really looking forward to that. Meanwhile, Fox News alert from London, where British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been confirmed with the coronavirus.
Everybody who's working to keep our country going through this epidemic, and we will get through it. And the way we're going to get through it is, of course, by applying the measures that you'll have heard so much about.
How he plans to lead the nation's fight against the pandemic, given that diagnosis.
This program is sponsored by Rakuten. Easy cash back. Rack it up with Rakuten.
Hey, son, I wanted to have a grown-up talk.
Dad,
I thought I knew.
We get to about 8 o'clock Saturday.
Arrest.
The first order and free delivery.
Coronavirus outbreak. This has led consumers some consumers at least, to increase their use of alternatives such as meal kit provider Blue Apron. Blue Apron delivers ingredients and recipes for meals people can cook at home. Joining us now, Blue Apron CEO Linda Findlay Kozlowski. Linda, fantastic to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Back into that parasympathetic state. And this mantra, I am safe, will help you sleep at night.
Oh, that sounds like a wonderful idea. I may try that one myself. And I hear that you keep crayons out so you can know to remind yourself to write out your intentions.
I've got my 15-month-old's crayons in a big box, and throughout the day, my husband and I will just write down different mantras or intentions. We'll also put Post-its throughout the house, just saying, this is our mantra for the day. You could put a positive affirmation on a Post-it and put it on your mirror in the morning. And just do things to elevate yourself all throughout the day so you can sustain this time.
Yeah, have that attitude of gratitude. Find something, and get out of yourself. Well, thank you so much. I hope you're doing well. The family's doing well, Gabby? Everyone's fine?
Everybody's good. And I really am happy to see you're home. taking care of yourself and your family too. Yeah.
Thank you. And I'm looking around yours too. I'm like, oh, you look like you're in upstate New York. Yeah, you got that upstate New York feel in that house. Love it. Looking good. Looking good. Thanks, Gabby.
Yeah. Thank you, Robin.
Yeah. You take care. Have a safe weekend. And now to Ginger. We'll be looking in the background where Ginger is home. Yeah, that's your basement, right, Ginger?
Yes, Robin, I've already written my intention, and now I've got a little something extra special. Thank you, Gabby and Robin. And now something special for you, a GMA moment from Atlanta. This one is 2-year-old Makai, because we are all focused on wellness.
Huh? Vitamin, good job. What is this one? Elderberry. Elderberry, good job. What is this one? Echinacea. Echinacea, good job.
Echinacea. Oh, we love that so much. Thank you, Ebony from Atlanta, Georgia, for sending that in. Take a moment, if you wouldn't mind. Put your GMA moment on my Facebook page or right in my Instagram DMs, and that way we can share it with the rest of the world. Appreciate that so much, and hope you get a check now a little closer to home. Elderberry.
It's a warm and cloudy start to your day. Temperatures should be back up into the low 70s as soon as early this afternoon. We'll likely see those temperatures topping out in the upper 70s, if not low 80s for some folks. Winds generally into the afternoon hours.
That's the theory right now. And what it's looking like is when people get it, they get this immunity to it because they build up their antibodies. That immunity, we're not sure how long it'll last because sometimes they last a while, sometimes they go away after just a little bit of time. But most experts are saying they think it's going to last at least a year, hopefully a lot longer than that.
Okay, and actually our next Facebook question is on that. It's from Brenda. Do they have testing available to test for antibodies in blood for those who think they may have already had it?
So right now there's a test called an ELISA test, and they can test for antibodies, but it's a bit of a cumbersome test because it requires a blood draw. It has to be sent to the lab. Takes a day or two to get results. What they talked about last night on a press conference, Dr. Burke said we need a point of care testing where they can basically do a finger prick test. They can get blood, and they can tell within a few minutes whether you have the antibodies or not. This is going to help us with a couple of things. Finding out all the asymptomatic cases that are out there, which is probably a large number, but more importantly, you've probably heard of that convalescent plasma we've been talking about, which can be used to treat somebody. If somebody has infected with it, they have antibodies in their body, we can tell from that plasma, we can tell from that test if they have the antibodies, use their plasma to treat somebody else. Again, that treatment though is going to be used on a case-by-case basis only for the critically ill. It's not quite up to FDA approval yet, so again, it's just going to be used very sparingly and only if they need to.
Okay, I got a couple more. Here we go. Next question from David on Facebook. Is it true men seem to be suffering more seriously from the virus than women?
It is true that men seem to be suffering more seriously. A couple things. They seem to be getting it more often, and they seem to be having worse outcomes because of it. And we think there's a few reasons. Number one, men tend to engage in riskier behaviors, and they're not necessarily listening to all the social distancing. They tend to gather more and do more things together, which spreads it around. On top of that, they have higher rates of smoking overall, especially in different parts of the world. China and Italy, we've noticed huge increases there. And women generally tend to have stronger immune systems overall because of their genetics, and that stronger immune system is helping them survive this more than men. It's not a huge difference, but it's a big enough difference that it's raising a few red flags.
All right, I really only have 20 seconds, but Valerie on Facebook says, is acetaminophen, which is what's in Tylenol, really better to use rather than ibuprofen? People have said ibuprofen might make it worse.
And this is hitting a lot on social media. Experts are saying there's no credible evidence behind this. The World Health Organization did a quick review of the data and said they find no data to support this. And so overall, they're both equally good. If you're excessively worried about it, then I would just switch to acetaminophen or Tylenol at this point. But there's no evidence that to say that ibuprofen's any worse than acetaminophen.
Okay, Dr. Torres, thank you. Keep the questions coming. Just ahead, Broadway legend Kristen Chenoweth and Carson Daly.
My name is Caleb Kilburn. I am the youngest master distiller in the state of Kentucky. So I first heard about the Key Scholarship when I was in middle school, and it really helped kind of set.
University, much bigger than ours, much smaller.
We have a couple more counties added on to a severe threat risk for strong to severe thunderstorms. The main impacts would be some damaging winds and some hail, something that we'll be watching as we head through the evening. And even higher risk is going to be in the forecast for tomorrow. So if you're planning on going out and about starting your Saturday, definitely want to pay close attention to the forecast. Cold front will cool temperatures down into the 60s and even the 50s by next week.
How are universities recruiting students right now in the age of this social distancing? Well, Southern Illinois University in particular, they recently moved every single recruiting effort online. John Frost, he's the director of undergraduate admissions, saying they're kind of looking at this as a new opportunity for the university.
We're not looking at this as a setback. We're looking at it as an opportunity. I mean, at the end of the day, we try to do a great job of working with people and understanding what's going on with them. And so we're going to keep working and try to make sure that those kids don't feel like they don't have any options in regards to choosing SIU as a school that they want to succeed their educational dreams with.
Well, the admissions office then makes what they're calling meaningful contact with potential new students to share information. SIU plans to do so until it is no longer needed.
Yet. We've been talking today.
Case of COVID-19 in Jackson County. Officials with the Jackson County Health Department say a man in his late teens tested positive for the virus. They say he is at home, also in isolation. This is the second lab-confirmed case of COVID-19 in Jackson County. This person is thought to have contracted the virus after a recent trip to Chicago. Now let's check in with meteorologist John Ross.
Yeah, good morning, Dave. We are starting out cloudy out the door right now. Temperatures relatively warm. We've got a start in the 60s so far. Carbondale 61, 59 in Marion. Golconda, though, coming in at 63. Mount Vernon 63 there at Somersville Grade School. So
different social media platforms to connect as many children and the community members as they can. Neil Clark, the Boys and Girls Club's executive director, says that the programs the kids will be focusing on is their well-being. Right now it is 8:28. We'll check in with meteorologist Trent Okerson.
Yeah, it was fantastic yesterday.
Yes.
It was beautiful weather and another good day to get outside today. We've got some clouds starting to roll in, but still looking at a mild one. Will be dry. 79 today, breezy. 77 tomorrow. Could be some afternoon and evening thunderstorms.
New Colgate Optic White Renew.
Almost everything.
Terrific.
Like the power of...
Fell in love at first sight. It gets us everywhere we need to go.
That may cause a serious slowing of your heart rate. Common side effects include headache and tiredness. Ask.
Snow has arrived in Sochi.
Some seriously negative news on the economy in the month of April. I think that the worst news will probably come in April, but I always think that the market anticipates the worst news and looks beyond it.
Absolutely, and that's why, Stuart, we've seen this rally over the last few days. We're looking past the near-term problems that we're having and looking at what the economy is going to look like once we get the stimulus package that's been approved. Things will get better. That is a guarantee I'm putting out there. Things will get better. The timing, however, may take a little bit longer to play out. So stick with your plan of buying flowers.
Okay, here we go. It's almost 9:30 Eastern Time, Friday morning, when we hit it, and it's 9:30 right now. We start trading. What we're going to do is we're going to take you through the big averages, the Dow, S&P, and the NASDAQ, and we're going to put on the left-hand side of the screen a whole bunch of different kinds of stocks. Big tech, airlines, you name it, they'll be up there. We've opened sharply lower. We're down 890 points on the Dow Industrials. That's almost 4%. But I have to remind you, yesterday we were up 1,300 points on the Dow Industrials. That was up. This morning we're down 860. As for the NASDAQ, we're down 232 points. That sounds enormous, and it is. But please remember, we had an enormous rally yesterday. Same story with the S&P. You're down 85 points. That's 3.25%. That's a kind of drop. Now, let's go through some of the stocks. I want to go through big tech and that kind of company to see how we're responding after yesterday's big rally. The Dow Industrial is now down 790. Okay, big tech. Amazon is down 18, Apple's down 6, I've got Microsoft down 4, but Google is down 33, Facebook is down 5 points. So we...
How in the world is Google down 34 points? That's crazy.
We've got a significant sell-off in big tech, but remember, please, it's a repeat. We had a big gain in these stocks yesterday. Personally, I don't see how Microsoft goes back to 130. That was its low. I'm not sure it'll go back to that. That's my opinion. I don't see how Facebook will go back to the low 140s. It's at 156. I think that will hold. Not that price will hold, but I don't think we'll go back and retest the low. Now, in just a few moments, we're going to be joined by Sandra Smith, co-anchor of America's Newsroom. We will be simulcasting on the Fox News channel. We'll get to that in just a moment. As we go to the simulcast, I can tell you now, the Dow is down 850 points.
Back below 22,000. That's a loss of about 3.75%. Stuart Varney is now joining us from the Fox Business Network. We're simulcasting, so you're still on your show, Stuart, and you're joining us here as well. And we're looking at these markets together. We've been watching this entire process play out, and now there have been big hopes on this $2 trillion relief package for struggling Americans. That led to 3 days of rallies. And Stuart, here we have an 800-plus point drop this morning. What's going on? Good morning.
I would just ask everybody to remember that yesterday the Dow was up 1,300 points. You can expect a bit of a pullback today. And over the last 3 days, the market overall has been up about 20%. That is the most explosive rally since 1933. So you can expect a little bit of a pullback. You can expect some people to take the profit that they made over the last 3 days. There may also be very much concern about the state of the economy. Yesterday we learned that there were over 3 million first-time jobless claims. We're told that the unemployment rate could go to around 10%. All of that bad news will come in the early part of April. So the market may be anticipating to some degree some very bad news coming up on the economy in the near future. Right now we're down 800 on the Dow, Sandra.
We're watching the House floor where there is expected to be several hours of debate on that relief package. And some indications there could be a no vote by this Kentucky Congressman Massey. We might see him just a moment from now. We've got a stakeout camera there. The president referencing him as a possible grandstander in all this. If there were to be a delay with that package passing in the House, Stuart, what would that mean for the economy and the American people?
Well, it would mean that the money doesn't get out there to the American people as fast as it should. If the market would not like it, you might see a further downside move because of it. And you get people generally throwing up their hands frankly, in disgust at the shenanigans of Congress that they can't work out in a national emergency like no other, that they can't get...
That's exactly what it is. It's a shenanigan. It's a shenanigan. That is so sad during the time of a crisis whenever people are dying. Unbelievable. They should have already got this passed. This should have been a done deal. It just shows that this government is broken and it's not functioning according to the way that other governments perform in regards to safety issues and taking care of its citizens. There's no time for shenanigans. But yet, no, that's what we're seeing. I personally believe that this has come upon to us partly in regard to what has and is going on up there in the White House pertaining to the charades that they pull in front of the American people. Kind of like the impeachment trials. Started out being an impeachment inquiry, then impeachment hearings, then hearings to trial, and then when it was all said and done with, it was a flop. After $50 million to the American people's purse, it turned out to be nothing but a flop. God Almighty, please have mercy on all of us towards what we're experiencing and what we're being be what we're seeing and what we're experiencing and what is going on in today's society. Lord, Lord, Lord.
Navarro, with FEMA, with HHS, with the Department of Homeland Security, with OMB to make sure that we have the right purchasing process in place. So this response is coming together day by day, but it is happening, and I'm very pleased that manufacturing can be a part of the solution of this very, very critical problem that we have right now.
I take your point as well about how quickly everybody's had to react here, whether it's the medical professions, workers across all sectors as well. Agnostic is an interesting word, though. What benefit can you point to that perhaps the Defence Production Act and greater coordination would provide? Or are you simply saying it wouldn't provide any greater benefit?
Well, actually, it could in a case-by-case basis. So,
right.
And some may get this benefit and some may not. But here's the thing. We are coordinated. We're well coordinated with the federal government. In fact, FEMA is using the National Association of Manufacturers. We've polled our members. We have 1,600 manufacturers stepping up for more production of those personal protective equipment and medical supply items. We are also focusing on the food supply and making sure our food manufacturers are able to produce what they need. The Defense Production Act, if it is invoked on a case-by-case basis, could actually provide government funding and loans and grants to help manufacturers repurpose their manufacturing lines. We haven't had to have that quite yet, but we may. I just want to leave the door open. I think the president was actually very smart to say that this is a tool that can be used. We may need to use it, we may not. Let's see, but let's not worry about, should we do it broadly, should we not do it broadly when manufacturers are stepping up. I'll say one other thing that we're dealing with here in the United States, and it is a patchwork of decisions coming out of governors and localities on what is considered critical and essential to our nation's, to this response to the pandemic, and what is not. I've got a manufacturer, for instance, in Baltimore. Some states may not have considered a wire basket maker to be critical as part of our nation's infrastructure and response. He was called by a lab last Friday and said, look, can you make baskets to hold test tubes to be able to respond to all these tests that we're getting in? He'd never done it before. He repurposed his line on his own in a matter of hours, and they were able to fill this order by Sunday. So our message to governors and to mayors and local elected officials is assume that all manufacturing is critical, not only for medical supplies, but also for the food supply chain. And we're making the right decisions if we can't be a part of that particular solution and we're suspending operations.
That's America at its best in our ingenuity skills towards being able to take one thing and transform it over into something else. That's America at its best. And that's what we want to hear more cases of. The U.S. House voting on the $2 trillion stimulus and package. That is ludicrous towards how come that hadn't already went in front of the president for the president to sign in regards to a major crisis that's going on here in America. I tell you, I've never seen nothing like it as far as a broken system, as far as a country that basically don't know what the left hand is doing versus the right. It's unbelievable in how the things are being handled right now, either on a professional scale or an emergency scale. It's heartbreaking. It's heart-wrenching. It's sad. And I really don't feel like that the full effect has fallen into a great deal of the commentators, the media that gets up there and talks about this stuff. Because if the truth be known, they've probably got a real cushy job to begin with. Probably making about $100,000, maybe over $100,000 a year. The vast majority of them's got a nice little cushy bank account set up, and they got a nice little cushy whatever set up, and So they can get on TV and they can talk about it all day long, but as far as actually feeling the effects of all this, like a lot of us down here on the bottom end, reality hadn't struck in them like it has us. Those who have lost their jobs, those who already have medical conditions, those who are already elderly or old, I guarantee you has taken a different perspective on all of this in comparison to what the vast majority of them in the media has taken. And I'm not saying all of them, because some of them has understood the seriousness of this, and they have displayed it very methodically on their shows, to the point of being able to understand the sincerity of what they're trying to display to the viewers. But most of them get up there and it's just another way of being in the limelight. We're gonna get up there and prance around in front of the camera. That way we can act smart and be pretty. Good luck to all of us. And shalom.